In the early hours before dawn, Tel Aviv slept under a blanket of winter haze, unaware that inside an anonymous, windowless building near the Hakiria military compound, a crisis meeting had been convened. Mossad's Special Counter-Operations Directorate gathered around a long metal table illuminated only by a single row of ceiling lamps. There were no insignias, no unit names, only the faint hum of servers behind a glass wall and the muted tension in the room. At the head of the table stood Director Yael Ben-Ari, known for her ability to detect patterns where others saw noise. She clicked a remote, and a grainy satellite image appeared on the screen. A convoy moving through northern Iraq 2 nights earlier. As the frame sharpened, a target was circled in red. Dr. Reza Khosravi, an enigmatic figure long rumored inside Western intelligence circles as the architect behind Iran's foreign assassination division. For years we believed he was a phantom, Yael began, her voice steady. But this, she pointed to the image, is our first visual confirmation in over a decade. The room stiffened. Khosravi was more myth than man, a physicist turned strategist. He was believed to oversee Tehran's clandestine campaign targeting dissidents and rival operatives in Europe and the Middle East. His unit operated in layers, proxies, cutouts, non-state actors. Nothing ever traced back to him. Intelligence analysts called his operational style the invisible signature. Yael clicked again. A dossier appeared half-redacted. 3 attacks in the last 18. Months show identical patterning, same procurement routes, same encryption clusters, same timing windows. She paused. He's active again, and he's accelerating. Beside her, Avi Rahamim, Mossad's top field strategist, leaned forward with a skeptical look. We've chased shadows of Khosravi before, he said. Every time we think we're close, the trail goes cold. How do we know this lead isn't another dead end? Yael replied by switching to a final slide, an intercepted encrypted message from an Iranian proxy cell in Istanbul. The message contained Khosravi's personal authentication token, a cryptographic idiosyncrasy analysts had spent 8 years trying to reconstruct. It was unmistakable. This is him, she confirmed. And he's preparing a high-impact operation abroad. We estimate the timeline is weeks, not months. Silence took the room. Then Yael delivered the decision already approved by the political echelon. We neutralize him. A murmur ran across the table. Part anticipation, part dread. Targeting Khosravi meant stepping into a labyrinth of covert networks spanning 3 countries. His security architecture was notorious. Mirrored safe houses, shifting communication nodes, 2 layers of decoys trained to mimic his movements. The first step, she explained, was identification and pattern disruption. They needed a crack in his routine, however small, something human, something imperfect. That crack came from an unexpected source, a defector in Europe, recently debriefed, who claimed that once every 6 weeks, Khosravi personally met a courier, carrying analog intelligence packets, documents. He refused to transmit digitally. Avi smiled faintly. Analog, he murmured. For a ghost, he's surprisingly old-fashioned. Yael nodded. And that habit is how we'll find him. The operation had begun. The courier's name was Farid Navabi, a mid-level intelligence runner whose existence hovered below the threshold of international attention. He moved like a ghost between Tehran, Ankara, and Baku, just another face in the crowds of airports, bazaars, and border checkpoints. But to Mossad, after the defector's testimony, Farid represented the only predictable link to Dr. Reza Khosravi. Inside Mossad's operations center in Tel Aviv, a massive digital map glowed with intersecting layers of Farid's reconstructed movements. For weeks, analysts had scraped fragments, ATM withdrawals in obscure towns, car rental invoices under shell identities, border-crossing timestamps captured by outdated CCTV. Piece by painstaking piece, they stitched together his rhythm. The breakthrough came when analyst Lior Sheikh isolated a repeating pattern. Every 6th Thursday, Farid landed in Istanbul under a new alias, but always stayed within a 700-meter radius of the same district, Fatih, a dense tapestry of alleys, spice stalls, and safe houses disguised as travel agencies. That cluster became the center of Mossad's attention. Meanwhile, a covert four-man field team was deployed to Turkey under deep cover. Their leader, Orhan Halabi, had spent years operating across the Middle East. Calm, deliberate, and fluent in regional dialects, he carried the presence of someone who had survived more close calls than he cared to count. For 8 days, the team blended into the noise of Istanbul, posing as tourists, merchants, and students. They set up layered surveillance grids, a rotating team inside cafes with mirrored windows, a mobile operator trailing Farid's rental cars, a drone disguised as a delivery quadcopter hovering at legal altitude. Every move was silent. Nothing drew attention. On the 9th morning, Farid emerged from a narrow building marked only by a faded sign in Armenian script. He wore a dark cap pulled low, his posture stiff, clutching a small, weathered leather pouch. As he walked briskly toward the metro line, Orhan signaled the team. "He has the packet. Track only. No contact." Farid moved with a paranoia that bordered on ritual. He stopped twice to tie his shoes, classic counter-surveillance. He wiped his phone screen against his sleeve to check for reflections. He entered a crowded metro train, waited for the doors to almost close, then slipped out at the last second. A routine designed to flush out any tail, but Mossad's network was layered. When Farid changed trains, Orhan's team didn't follow. Another undercover pair, already waiting, took over seamlessly. Farid would never see the same face twice. That was the advantage of a multinational, multi-identity deployment. Late that afternoon, Farid made a move none of them had anticipated. He boarded a ferry headed across the Bosphorus toward Kadıköy, a more relaxed district, far from his usual path. Orhan's voice cracked faintly through the encrypted channel. "He's breaking pattern. He might be heading to the handoff point." Cameras tracked Farid as he stepped off the ferry and walked toward a quiet side street. At the end of the alley stood a modest tea house with blue shutters. Inside, waiting in the shadows, was a man believed to be one of Khosravi's personal coordinators, a rare node close enough to smell the mastermind's next move. This was the closest Mossad had come to Khosravi's network in years, and the trap was only beginning to tighten. The air in Kadıköy was thick with the smell of brewed tea, grilled fish, and damp asphalt. Inside the small tea house with its faded blue shutters, Farid Navabi moved with careful calculation. The Mossad surveillance team, invisible yet omnipresent, mirrored his every step through hidden cameras, street-side operatives, and encrypted drone feeds. Every sip of tea, every glance over his shoulder was catalogued. Every heartbeat was a clue. At a corner table, the coordinator of Khosravi's network awaited him. The man's face was partially obscured by a scarf, but Mossad analysts had identified him through biometric anomalies in past intercepted footage. A scar near his right temple, and a distinctive gait when he shifted weight from foot to foot. This man, like Farid, was a link to the elusive mastermind. Farid approached the table, placing the leather pouch carefully on the wood surface. He opened it, revealing a bundle of folded papers and a compact USB device. His hands shook ever so slightly, imperceptible to the untrained, but crystal clear on Mossad's ultra-slow-motion feeds. He checked the room again, a subtle glance that hinted at a deep-seated paranoia. Orhan Halabi, observing from a parked van down the street, whispered into the encrypted channel, "He's initiating the transfer. Eyes on every exit. No sudden moves." The transfer, however, was only the opening act. Farid had been cautious, but Mossad had prepared contingencies. Outside, undercover agents stationed in surrounding shops blended into the daily chaos. Their smartphones were equipped with real-time analytic overlays, capable of facial recognition, movement prediction, and behavioral anomaly detection. Every passerby was analyzed, every reflection scanned. Suddenly, a new figure emerged from the tea house's rear exit. Tall, in a gray coat, moving with deliberate grace. The man was immediately flagged by Mossad's AI-assisted tracking. Multiple analysts froze on the feed. He was Khosravi himself, the mastermind. No one outside his inner circle had ever seen him in person, and now he walked through the same street as Farid, seemingly unaware of the surveillance grid encasing him. Mossad teams had anticipated that Khosravi would occasionally inspect the handoff personally, but predicting the precise timing required every bit of intelligence, observation, and luck aligning perfectly. Khosravi's eyes scanned the alley, settling briefly on Farid. The coordinator handed over the package. Their hands nearly touched, a silent acknowledgement of trust, of shared secrets. Mossad's digital overlays tracked every micro-expression, every subtle movement. Oren's voice remained calm, but tension vibrated through the comms. Maintain distance. Wait for the signal. We don't move until he leaves the alley. For 30 minutes, time seemed to bend. Khosravi studied the handoff, his gaze moving like a predator evaluating prey. Then, without a word, he turned and walked toward a black sedan parked at the far end of the street. The car's license plates were false, its driver unknown. Every step was calculated, every shadow a potential threat. Mossad had to wait. They couldn't act until Khosravi was isolated, from both his coordinator and Farid. One misstep could send him slipping back into the labyrinth of safe houses, cutouts, and proxies that had frustrated international intelligence agencies for over a decade. And in that tense pause, Oren reminded himself of one rule. In operations like this, patience was as lethal as action. The trap was almost ready to spring. The streets of Karakoy were alive with mid-afternoon bustle. Market vendors shouted over the din of traffic. The smell of roasting chestnuts mingled with exhaust fumes, and tourists wandered aimlessly, photographing historic buildings. To an ordinary observer, the alley where Khosravi had just exited the tea house appeared innocuous, yet it had become the center of a meticulous net woven by Mossad. Inside a nondescript van parked across the street, Oren Halevi and his 4-person field team monitored multiple feeds. The live satellite overlay tracked Khosravi's movement down the narrow side street. He walked with the confidence of a man who believed he was invisible. Yet the team knew every step was catalogued in real time. Yael Ben-Ari, observing remotely from Tel Aviv, instructed through the encrypted line, "Initiate the lure. Ensure Khosravi remains unaware of the perimeter tightening. He must move toward our extraction point without suspicion." The lure was simple in theory, but lethal in execution. Mossad had recreated a false intelligence drop documents, suggesting a rival faction inside. His own network was about to betray him. The decoy package, meticulously crafted, contained traces of information that only Khosravi would recognize. To him, it was an irresistible signal, an opportunity to assert control, a chance to neutralize a potential leak before it reached Tehran. The plan relied on Khosravi's habits. Analysts had observed that when confronted with potential network compromise, he never sent intermediaries. He went himself. That instinct, predictable and precise, became the cornerstone of the trap. As Khosravi turned onto a narrower street lined with shuttered shops, 2 undercover operatives slipped into position behind him. Their identities were imperceptible. Their movements mimicked the natural flow of pedestrians. On the other side, a parked black van waited, silent, engine off, but equipped for rapid extraction if the operation escalated. Farid and the coordinator had already disappeared, leaving Khosravi alone. The mastermind's aura of invincibility was evident in his posture, upright, shoulders squared, eyes scanning every reflective surface. But Mossad had observed him long enough to anticipate not only his patterns but his reactions to perceived threats. A subtle signal triggered the next phase. A pedestrian, actually. A Mossad agent accidentally dropped a small parcel at Khosravi's feet. His gaze flickered, a micro-expression of surprise barely visible even in high-definition feeds. He bent to pick it up, revealing a wristwatch engraved with a numeric code, the decoy intel Mossad had planted months earlier. It confirmed the bait had been taken. Oren whispered into the comms, "He's in. Phase 2 active. Maintain perimeter." Khosravi moved toward the extraction point, completely unaware that every step was calculated, tracked, and anticipated. The alleyways, once his shield, had become a gauntlet. Cameras obscured in lampposts, drones hovering at legal altitudes, and operatives blending into the street all tightened the circle. Patience, Yael reminded the team, was everything. Any overt action now risked alerting Khosravi. The operation was a psychological chess game, a test of nerves. Mossad's agents could not force the move. They had to let him follow the invisible thread they had spun. And as the mastermind advanced, the trap, meticulously set over months, began to close. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the narrow Karakoy streets. The city's usual hum of activity felt muted to Mossad's field team, though no one outside the operation would notice. Every moment now was a test of timing, precision, and nerve. Khosravi, the phantom mastermind, was moving exactly as anticipated, but the margin for error was infinitesimal. From the van parked 2 blocks away, Orhan Halavi and his team observed Khosravi approaching, a dead-end alley that had been carefully chosen as the containment zone. On either side, Mossad operatives blended seamlessly into the urban landscape, one posing as a street cleaner, another as a shop assistant, a third casually walking a dog. Drones hovered above, invisible in the crowded skyline, capturing every angle. Yael Ben-Ari, monitoring remotely from Tel Aviv, gave a final directive over the encrypted comms. Engage the extraction cordon. Khosravi must be isolated without alerting him to the perimeter. Timing is critical. Do not deviate. Khosravi paused at the alley's entrance. His instincts were razor-sharp. He sensed an anomaly. For a moment, the operation teetered on the edge of exposure. But the decoy intelligence had worked its magic. The package at his feet earlier had confirmed his suspicions about betrayal, compelling him forward. As he entered the alley, operatives subtly closed in from both sides. Every step was measured, every shadow accounted for. Mossad's strategy relied not on brute force, but on precision, psychology, manipulating the environment to funnel Khosravi into a space where extraction could occur safely. The mastermind's reputation for meticulous planning was legendary, yet he now walked into the orchestrated sequence of events. Sensors embedded in the walls detected movement and heartbeat patterns. The team had rehearsed this convergence hundreds of times in virtual simulations. Orhan whispered, "Phase final, execute." The extraction began almost imperceptibly. A van door quietly opened at the alley's far end. Khosravi, conditioned to react to the threat of betrayal, instinctively glanced toward the shadows behind him. That split second of hesitation allowed Mossad operatives to close the gap. 2 hands, firm yet controlled, guided him into a low-profile restraint. Not a single shot fired, no alarms triggered. Simultaneously, Farid's earlier handoff had created the illusion of a normal street operation. By the time the surrounding pedestrians registered anything unusual, the extraction was complete. Khosravi was secured, blindfolded, and transported to a waiting vehicle disguised as a local delivery truck. Back at Tel Aviv, Yael exhaled. The culmination of months of surveillance, analysis, and preparation had succeeded without a single operational compromise. The world would never know the risks that had been navigated in those moments, how close a misstep could have unraveled the entire mission. Mossad's victory was not in force, but in the mastery of invisibility. Khosravi, once untouchable, had been neutralized through a combination of patient observation, predictive psychology, and flawless field execution. As the van disappeared into Istanbul's labyrinthine streets, Yael leaned back in her chair, the faint hum of the command center filling the silence. She knew the operation would be classified for decades. No accolades, no headlines, just another shadow secured in the quiet war of intelligence. In the shadows, the line between myth and reality blurred, and the world continued, unaware of the mastermind who had been removed from the chessboard. The operation was complete.